species, indigenous species, or either we are dealing with exotic species. Like it or not, okay. Uh, from time to time, okay, we will be dealing with new species that comes into existence in our uh, current populations. And more often than not, some of the species that has been introduced or be found accidentally, okay, uh, in the population. Some of them could be very dangerous, either to the ecosystems or to the humans that deal, okay, with a particular species. And we call this an invasive alien species. So, before we go toward that, we must understand the concept of the species that are available in our ecosystem. The first one is that we need to understand the concept of a native species. So native species are those that normally live and thrive in a particular community, and they occupy a specific habitats and have specific niches in their native environment. So normally, native species will have their own predators or biological control that help to keep their population in check. Meaning to say, all over the world, each species have their own enemies or have the opposite of it, such as the day and night, the bad things and the good things. And each species have their own nemesis or arch enemy. And this to ensure the balance of nature. This to ensure that not a particular species will dominate other species. Okay, just like human species. We thrive so well and we try to oppress other species. But from time to time, we as a species also will be controlled or will be cut off by certain other species. We have undergone one of the biggest threat or control mechanisms in our entire history of human, which is the COVID-19. So we say that we human also will face certain dangers, okay, biologically that can actually affect our population growth. Aside from the other limitation or the abiotic factors such as economic factors, such as the resource factors, um, space, and so on. Okay, but we as a species also have threat from other species, and from time to time we are always in conflict with other species. If you take a look in certain part of the world, there are cases where human is in conflict with wild species like tigers in India, or like venomous species like snakes, scorpions, centipedes, and so on. And of course, the biggest threat to us is the microorganisms, is the hazardous microbe. That's why we always develop new antibiotics. Meaning to say, all right, in the ideal situation of the world, each species will be checked in terms of population by their natural predators or natural nemesis or enemy. And then in a particular species, aside from native species, okay, the other concept we talk about invasive species is the non-native species. So what is the definition of a non-native species? Non-native species is a species living outside its native distributional range, which has arrived there by human activity. Either they were introduced or being brought into the particular environment deliberately or accidentally. So non-native species could be in terms of what we call exotic species, which is from another part of the world, which is foreign in nature, or introduced species that implies the introduction of a certain species, but they might not impose any threat sometimes. And the alien species. So alien species actually a species to be introduced and they might grow to become a nuisance later on. However, we must always put in mind that non-native species are not necessarily invasive. Some of them could blend very well and be beneficial to the new environment. Just like most of our vegetables out there, or some of our foods out there, they will be introduced from a certain part of the world to another part of the world, and we benefit from them very much. However, some of them might pose a hazard to us or to the new environment or ecology that being introduced upon. So how do we consider a species or a newly introduced species or a foreign species or a non-native species as an alien or as an invasive alien? Well, normally we can use the 10% rules. Okay, normally, whenever we introduce a new species, about 10% of it will leave, okay, due to the difference in climates, food availability, and other factors. And of the 10% that could leave, only 10% will actually breed and become invasive. This is from the environmental estimations. And if you take a look at the case study in the United States, all right, so far it's around 6,500 species have been considered or established as an invasive alien species in the United States alone. However, this rule might have changed a little bit with the improvement in technology, with the improvement in transportations, with the needs of research and food production, where the movement, where the capability or the ability of a newly of introduction of species is actually becoming easier and better. Right? So invasive species could come in many forms. Either they are plants, they might be insects, or maybe in terms of the microbe that causes disease. So what is a non-native invasive species? So a non-native invasive species is actually a non-native species that can adversely affect the habitats and the biodiversity. Two examples were given here. For insect, for example, the emerald ash borer, Agrillus planipenis. This particular insect has killed millions of ash trees in the Midwest or in America, and has recently been found in Pennsylvania and surrounding states in America. Okay, except for a certain state like the Delaware in America. Or for plants, we can study in the case of the Japanese stilt grass, Microstygium viminium. Okay, this particular grass being established recently in disturbed areas, and this particular grass can outcompete the native plants, okay, and thus will reduce the diversity in a particular niche and environment. What are the common characteristics of an invasive species? In general, they have a very few natural predators, competitors, parasites, or diseases, and they normally have high reproductive rates. And normally they are long-lived, or generalist, meaning that they are very versatile and can exist or can thrive and survive at most of the climates. And they normally can become a pioneer species, meaning that they can thrive even on disturbed lands. For example, we clear up the jungles. Okay, so maybe there's not much nutrients, there's not much topsoils over there, and not much coverage or shadows or canopies, but certain invasive species, they can become the pioneer at a particular place, even though the place is barren. And normally, the species also can produce seeds in abundance. They can produce a lot of seeds. That's why they have a rapid population establishments. And the seed itself have a good dormancy characters where the seed itself can survive for a long period. And then they can occupy disturbed sites, as I mentioned before, and they are very, very competitive with local or native species. And of course, in general, as we mentioned at the beginning of the slide, they might like the natural enemies. For example, the cheat cross and the juniper. You can take a look at this as well as a case study. And most of invasive species, they actually be considered weeds. And I'm sure you got your own subject, which is the weed science. So as we know, weeds is a plant of little value or a plant that is out of place. It's not necessarily something bad. Weeds could be a beneficial plant but existed at the wrong place at the wrong time. and they can compete with our crops and the native species. And they normally become troublesome because we don't want them and then we need to spend some of our resources in managing them. But however, for some people, weeds is actually not bad. Maybe there are actually a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered, such as mentioned by Ralph Waldo Emerson's part. And then, according to Ross Lambie in Applied Weed Science, plants that interfere with the growth of desirable plants and that are unusually persistent and pernicious, that negatively impact human activities and such are undesirable. So that is another definition of weeds. And weeds have lots of impacts. It can reduce biological diversity, altering hydrologic conditions, can alter soil characters and fertility, can alter fire intensity and frequency in certain places or countries where weeds actually a major causes for bushfires. And weeds also can interfere with the natural successions. Normally, some species will be wiped out after several generations of the weed establishments. And then they can compete for native pollinators. Do not forget this. Okay? Replacing complex communities with monocultures when weeds thrive, the diversity in a certain place, will be reduced because the weed will compete with others and will replace other species. And upon a certain period of time, you can see that all the different plants and species that once existed in a particular place will be gone and be replaced with just the weed species. And then because they have the ability to displace the rare plant species. And some of the weed is known as noxious weed, another name for invasive species. So noxious actually means species that have been designated noxious by law. So normally, in certain countries, certain species of weeds, will be gazetted nationally as noxious by law. So that could mean deleterious. So weeds that are being declared noxious actually will have a stricter and better regulated rules and regulation and practice or procedures to control them. For example, you can take a look at the Idaho state law, how they gazetted the weed species and how they provide clear guidelines on how to manage them. So what prevents species from dispersing globally? So how do we want to control it? So we need to take a look at what are the natural barriers that could prevent the dispersals of certain species, and at the world levels. So the first one is the geographic barriers: the oceans, mountains, desert, and large lakes. These are the natural barriers that could prevent the spread of a non-native species, to a particular place. And this is actually what happened. This is actually the barrier that trigger the evolutions of plants and species all over the world. The oceans, the mountains, the deserts, and the lakes. However, with the advancements of our civilizations that we call globalizations, we have become so advanced in transportation or logistically, communication becomes shorter, and our needs also have been blended well. So the globalization is actually one of the key that enable introductions of a particular species to a new environment. Because species now can be transported across these barriers at an alarming and increasing rate, of course, because of our own human movement and commerce. And nowadays, the major vectors of introductions have become the planes, ships, and human itself. And in some cases, the rate of spread may be 50,000 times greater than by natural dispersals. Normally, it takes years by accidents, maybe by birds or mammals, or by drifting in the oceans and something like that. However, with the introductions or with globalizations, with the advancements of human civilizations, the dispersal rate for non-native species have become really fast. If we look at the natural introduction of species in the previous history of humans, it takes maybe 100 or 200 years before a certain species can thrive or being established or arrive at the shore of another country. But now, it could happen overnight. And the vectors of inventions, okay, could be intentional release of target species into the containment. Okay, normally we have containment. Everyone, whenever they want to move a species out of a natural places, they will say that, oh, we will have containment at the new places. Oh, normally they will transport it to the zoos, get to the farm, get to the research area, but more often than not, okay, some of the species will surely escape this containment. All right, and at the same time, intentional release of target species into the environment. Okay, so normally, yes, even though we say that, okay, some of the species escape from the cage or from the containment, but from the beginning, all right, we actually intentionally release that into the containment before, so we already take the risk before they will escape. Okay, and secondly, of course, some species were intentionally being released into the environment, either for agriculture, forestry, or for soil improvement, either for ornamental plant or naturalization societies, birds and mammals for hunting, and of course, some species were introduced as a biological control. As irony as it is, yes, firstly, we introduce new species, and then the newly introduced species become hazardous, and then we brought in the enemy of the species. So it's a circle and cycle that is very ironic. And of course, the release of pets and the pet trade. So and also related to the vectors of invasions, there would be the release of non-target species, or dubbed as accidental release. For example, contaminants or hitchhikers. Some species, all right, accidentally been brought either through produce or ornamental plants and aquaculture, or through timber industry, or contaminant of seed stock. Sometimes we import seeds for a certain industry, and the seeds might be mixed accidentally with other type of seeds. With the cars, planes, hitchhikers with packing material, or the cargo, sometimes we use organic materials as a packing material to transport our goods, and that material could in fact become a vector. For example, we use wood. Inside the wood, there might be insect, there might be eggs of insects, there might be bacteria. All the balance in the ships or tourists or luggage of tourists, and then the canals of man-made environmental structure. In some places, we keep improving the transportation channel, like creating canals, creating new waterways, and these actually could lead to invasions of the species. And then the impact of invasive species is actually huge economically. Okay, we have tremendous economic losers. We have tremendous economic losers due to invasive species. As an example, wherever you go in the world nowadays, you would often observe this species of birds, the European starling, the Sturnus vulgaris. Okay, this species, okay, sometime when you visit the town in the evening, you can see that flocks and flocks of birds lining up on the cables, lining up on the lampposts, or even on the urban landscape trees. Okay, aside from the crows, okay, they are actually the European starlings, and they thrive all over the world. This particular bird itself, okay, damaged around 800 million. The estimated 800 million of agricultural crops is actually damaged by this bird species annually. And I think nowadays it become more rampage. So economic impact for some of the non-native species in the USA for your study case, in terms of plants, mammals, birds, and so on, you can see that in America alone in 2000, and now I think more than 20 years has passed, the numbers has increased 136 billion per year. Okay, the cost, the economic costs associated with non-native species in America alone. And then that's the economic impact. What about the ecological impacts? Okay, ecologically, the non-native species will have a direct competition with native species. This could lead to the loss of species diversity in an ecosystem. And at the same time, when there is loss, the interaction in our natural communities and food webs will be disrupted. And after that, it will affect our entire ecosystem function, not only in terms of the losing of a native species, but about the water and nutrients availability in a particular ecosystems. All right, some case studies about invasive species, how they can kill native species. In America, we can take a look at the hardwood trees. Okay, about a quarter of hardwood trees in eastern America, okay, actually used to be American chestnut. However, a fungus, a blight fungus, chestnut blight fungus, has killed most American chestnut, okay, by 1950s. All right, up to the point that some of them can be considered as being wiped out totally. And there are indirect impacts. Once we disturb the ecosystem, there would be disasters. Okay, there will be disasters. All right. So when we talk about the invasions, there are several stages of invasions by the non-native species. The first one is the opportunity or the transportation of it. The second stage is the establishment, and the third stage is the spreading of it. All right. But different characteristics may be important at different stages, depending on the species that's being invading. So the invasion curve. When we talk about invasions of a species, there is a curve. We call it an invasion curve. Okay. So when we look about the area that being infested, and over time, okay, the first stage is the introduction. All right. So during the introduction, okay, before, okay, in the beginning, all right, prevention and eradication is still simple. We can do physical eradication. That's why we must take fast actions. Okay, once we detect them at the early period, in term of invasions of non-native species, we must eradicate them quickly. All right, while they are still feasible. Okay, and this is based on the area and also the control cost. However, what happened normally? All right, by the time the public start to become aware, eradication is already too late. It's become unlikely already. That's why in managing invasions of species, in managing the loss of diversity, we need experts. We need a lot of experts that keep watching our biodiversity. If we just depend on public awareness, more often than not, it becomes too late. That's why we need experts and we need personnel that are willing to work silently, without publicity, without political mileage. We need people who can really assess the situations and take action. But more often than not, we will wait until the public become worried and so on, and then only then we start to take popular action. But by the time the public is aware, most of the time the case is already, okay, hard to be eradicated. What left after that is actually just a local control and management. And I think you are smart enough to take a look at this by the COVID or PKP or the MCO cases. We have detected the cases quite early. However, we keep waiting. Or until the public has become angry, until other countries have taken action, only then we want to take action. And what happened? We can only do local control and management. We need to live with it. While we can actually handle it better if we take the expert suggestion from the beginning. I don't want to sound political, but all of you are very smart enough. Now, the control methods also have several stages depending on the invention curve. The first one is the prevention. This is what we are doing right now, even through this class. Education, restriction, and monitoring. Now, please get yourself educated in whatever classes, in whatever channels, and then please keep monitoring our environment. And then try to evolve in eradications, because eradication job is very time sensitive. We cannot wait for long. Okay, either it could be physical, cultural, or biologicals and chemical, okay, approaches. And of course, the best way is that I'm sure you learn it in your pathology class, integrated pest management. It doesn't matter, but what's important for me is that we must do it at the right time. Do not wait till it's too late. So, and each of the control method will have their side effect. And I think everything in the world has a price. Okay, there's no silver bullet in the world. And I think it depends on the suitability, okay, of the particular cases. And I think that's all about today's topic, which is the invasions of alien species. And there's several materials that I will share with you also later on at the end of our lecture class, maybe next week. All right. Any questions, guys?
Doctor, I have one question.
Yes.
Doctor, is this class recorded? Because as I know, there's a friend from HRT 4400 is not joining because he have class.
I'm not sure. You need to ask our class rep whether they record it or not. Mio?
Yeah. I actually I already recorded, but not using Google Meet. I'm just using window recording. Later
Please.
we'll give the recording.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Jesse, take with me. All right.
All right, doctor. Thank you, doctor.
So these are some of the reading materials that I will give to you later on. Okay, please read about it. Okay, further. Okay, in this, all right, in this reading materials, okay.
Sorry doktor.
Yes.
Doktor ada buka slide tu sebab kita orang tak nampak.
Tak nampak Okay, sekejap. Nampak tak?
Nampak.
Okay. So I will give also this material also for you to read later on, maybe next week. Okay. And inside this, okay, this is what we call the Welles Global Diversity Realms. And this place is actually, this global diversity realms is actually about the natural barrier that existed in the world. And this barrier is actually what caused the diversity. But now these barriers have become obsolete because of globalizations, because of our own advancements. Okay, so please read this, okay, so that you understand how does a non-native species actually being introduced in the wild naturally before our time, and compare to what's happened nowadays. All right. And then the other thing that I would share with you is can you see this, guys?
Yes. Doktor.
All right. So this particular
Doktor hilang.
hilang. And this paper is actually discuss about these issues because invasions of a non-native species, native, non-native, is actually a never-ending cases. So we need to look forward, and I think it's too late to stop. Okay, so I think we need to try because the world is already changing, and I think in your generation there's a new models needed. How to coexist, how to cope with this. All right. So there might be possibility, a possible mechanism that allows competitive coexistence between native and exotic plants. And I think that's the only way forward. All right. We cannot stop globalizations because it will keep happening. So we need to find a solution. What is the best way to coexist? I think the barrier that we know or that has been known so far will be gone soon because no one can stop globalization, especially at this rate. Okay, so please read this. Okay, later on. And then the next paper. Okay, there is a paper. Wait. Okay, so this paper will help you understand further on the invasion and naturalization of alien plants. Beware, okay, whenever you talk, whenever you do your research about plant species, you must take a look at their distribution carefully. Because the invasions, okay, or introduction of plant species has happened for a very, very long time. Might be 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 70 years ago. So some of you might recognize the plant as local nowadays. All right. So when a plant is being introduced a long time ago, they might become naturalized already. We call it naturalizations. But that doesn't erase the fact that they were actually introduced, okay, in the beginning. All right, and there might be some effect, even though they already adapted to the current ecosystems. Okay, so as person who study botany and taking this class, so you need to be more careful when you look at the distributions of a plant species. So try to read this paper. All right, and the last one as a study case. All right, I will also give you this paper. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, so this is a study case of Malaysia. This is an old paper. It's very saddening, you know. Not many new paper is being produced regarding this. It's just because we are not. Yeah, too many things happening in the world, in the country lately. The research focus is gone, the economic crisis. So we rely on all informations. But this is one of the articles that's actually well written about the invasive plant in Malaysian landscape. Okay, so you can read this, okay, to get some glimpse and make your research further. There might be actually new papers, okay, how, okay, in the status of Malaysian landscape, okay, because a lot of new or exotic plants being introduced, okay, in our country through landscaping work. Okay, some of the plant, actually most of the plant that you see by the roadside, either in our campus or all over Malaysia, whenever you go, some of the trees actually look well blend in our landscape or in our surrounding, but they were actually being introduced. Okay, for example, the Delonix regia, yellow flames, and so on. Okay, because these old trees, okay, the Pterocarpus indicus, Delonix regia, Paleoforum, Pterocarpon, and the Jacaranda fisfolia, for example. You can find this place everywhere in the faculty, in the campus. It's just a matter either you recognize them or not. Okay, and also by the roadside in KL and so on. Actually, these plants being introduced by the British before we gain our independence. They not belong to us in the beginning. Okay, but the recent one is including the Kaya, Seneglensis, the Ticoma, the Tababuya, and also the Andira. They are still very popular nowadays. But I'm keep thinking, hopefully your generations try to popularize our native plants. If you are Malaysian and if you are in your own country, try to popularize the native plant of your own country, of a respective country into the landscape. And I think that would make the world a better place rather than trying to make the world the same place everywhere. Okay, I think that's all for today. Any question, my dear friends? Yes.
Hi, Doctor.
Yes. Hello.
So may I ask, where can we get all these papers and the slides?
I think the latest is by next week. Okay.
Oh, so Doctor will share through Putra Blast?
Yes, I'll share through Putra Blast everything. Don't forget to visit your Putra Blast by next week. Okay, there will be some quiz also. Okay.
All right, Doctor. Thank you.
You are welcome. On anything else? If nothing, please open the camera. Yes, Timothy, go ahead.
May I ask when is the quiz?
Maybe by next week through Putra Blast.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So guys, please open your camera, and class rep, please give us a count and snap a picture for our attendance.
Okay, later. Okay, ready. I see many of you still not open up your camera.
What happened?
Okay.
Up to this point, you should be ready and familiarized with cameras already. It's also a sign of professionalism. Okay. Put your pictures everywhere in your platforms. All right. Come on, guys. So go ahead, class rep.
Okay. Okay, ready everyone? 3, 2, 1. First take, second take. 3, 2, 1. Okay, last take. 3, 2, 1. All right.
All right. I think that's all for today. Be safe and take care, everyone. Make sure to enjoy yourself, okay, before you go home for holiday. That's all. Assalamualaikum and good evening. Class dismissed.
Thank you,
Doctor.
Doctor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye.